Hello, welcome to the Freight Buyers Club. I'm Mike King, and I'm delighted to say I'm here in Dimerco Express Group's Shanghai offices. We're here for Air Cargo China later this week, and I'm joined by Kathy Liu, who's VP for Global Sales and Marketing. Kathy, how are you? Welcome back to the Freight Buyers Club.
Hi, how are you, Mike? Welcome you to here to
Yes,
Shanghai. Yeah.
it's been a while, and much change has been afoot.
Yeah.
Can you give us, before we get into some of the key things that have been going on in the ocean freight markets and some of the big supply chain issues that are out there at the moment, can you just give us a little bit of a breakdown about what you do here in this Shanghai office and maybe a wider viewpoint of sort of this region's footprint and the China footprint?
hmm Yeah, I think the Dimerco is a Asian-based logistics service provider, and we actually get into China market quite early. Start from 1991. The first office we have actually is here in Shanghai, so it's already 35 years. Yeah, and after we established the representative office in Shanghai, then we have expand our service network, and up to now we have more than 70 offices all over China. So all those key hub, gateway, industry area, you can find our representative there. And in this area, we are not only do air and ocean, but also we do like custom brokerage, and also we have our facility in bonded area in the free trade zone. And we also have those other value added service in this area. So it's quite comprehensive service products we can offer here. Yeah.
Comprehensive indeed. If we look at the ocean side for a while, I'm very interested to get this China perspective on some of these global events. We've seen rates soaring on most of the key lanes since March. What exactly is going on there? Is this real demand? Is this carriers playing with capacity? How are you viewing this, and how are your customers coping with these increases?
Yeah, I think that's a lot of like mixed factors, and I think one of the key factor for sure is because of those crises in the Middle East, and we saw some vessels actually stuck there, so that also took a little bit the overall capacity from the global supply area side. And on the other hand, we see the front loading as well, because I believe the tariff this will getting expired by the end of June, something like that. The 180 days.
Yes, so this is the replacement for the IEEPA tariffs.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yes, I mean, there's a whole bunch of sectoral tariffs due to come in at different parts. Yeah, we need a tariff tracker, don't we?
Yeah, right. So that's too much. So I cannot really remember exactly. But because of that, so we see the front loading as well, especially for the transpacific eastbound.
So this is front loading peak season, basically, but because of new regulations and changes in the rules, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. And for sure, there's a shortage on supply as well. And we see some area that they are lack of the empty containers. That's also because of the Middle East crisis. Some vessels stuck there, or some vessels cannot unloading the containers at the port. So we see a certain percentage of the lack of empty container in couple of origins in Asia. So that's also make the supply a little bit tight compared with before.
And how's the Middle East war? Obviously, this has affected fuel prices across modes, but how are your customers coping with fuel surcharges? There's not just fuel surcharges. We've seen other disruptions as well, transit times, reliability. There's quite a few things going on in ocean at the moment.
Yeah, I think the for the like a fuel surcharge. So actually, it's the market situations like that. It's not for single shipping liners. So the customer can accept this kind of pass through cost for the fuel surcharge adjustment. But for others, actually, I think there's certain challenges, especially for the overall the transit time, lead time, and we see some of those customers switch to like a air, ocean, or sea air, this kind of different transportation mode to recover the lead time. And some of them for intra-Asia, they are using like a cross-border truck instead of ocean freight to shorten the overall lead time. Yeah, for sure, the cost will be a little bit higher, but for the supply chain perspective, it's still worth to make. make the change.
And how about peak season surcharges? It sounds like there is this early front loading, so we're looking at an early traditional peak season on the Transpac and the Asia Europe trade. How are people pushing back on peak season surcharges? Because they are unusually early.
Yeah, I think this year it's really getting early, but what we see is that maybe it will be closed also early because of the the overall the demand in the market is not really increasing. So just you move the cargo maybe before was going to third quarter, but now it's getting front loading to second quarter. So this is something happen. I think the peak season surcharge, a lot of those shipping line or most of the shipping line are already imposed, and I think it's reflect to the market situation. So the customer have to accept that. Yeah.
And how about port congestion? We're here in Shanghai that has struggled with congestion over the last year or two. What's the situation like at the moment here, and is congestion elsewhere a problem as well?
I think overall in Shanghai, Ningbo, those area, it's although there's a little bit port congestion, but because of those automation for the unloading, unloading process, so it's not really affect that much on the lead time. But for like India, like in Nhava Sheva and in like Colombo, in Singapore, Malaysia, those really the serious port congestion, and the vessel need to wait berth maybe not about 7 days until they can get the area to unloading the shipments. Yeah.
Is there any sign that the congestion's improving in some of those areas? Certainly in Colombo and Nhava Sheva, some of that was a knock-on domino effect from closure of Hormuz. Lots of containers were dumped in
Yeah,
those
right,
areas.
right.
Is that probably played into that?
Yeah, right. Because of those vessels stuck in the homes, they have to return back, and then most of those vessels they are trying to unloading their container in like a Colombo, Singapore, Nhava Sheva, those areas. Yeah.
Kathy, if we just cast your mind forward a little bit, because I'm very interested in shipper choice. Container shipping consolidation's been a factor for 20 odd years, but it seems to be accelerating at the moment. There's a lot of chatter about who's going to buy who, rumors about some sort of MSC Hapag-Lloyd deal. Hapag-Lloyd and the Zim deal that's due to go through before the end of the year. Are you worried about customer choice moving forward if the container shipping consolidation continues?
I think that's for shipping liner. Actually, there's, I mean, not that much choice in the market, and the number of vessels. I mean, through those like different those alliance, they're already sharing the capacity on those different vessels. So I don't think it will impact on the shipper's choice. And the recent years, I think when shipper make decision for which liner to use, most of time they are concerned is about the transit time, the schedule, reliability. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Kathy. Let's switch to air cargo. So we spoke about this last year. The end of US de minimis exemptions led to a big uplift in air cargo imports ahead of those deadlines. Um, in Europe, we've got a similar situation. Now we're talking just before July the 1st. The EU, it's a slightly different change compared to the US. Essentially, it's also getting rid of EU de minimis exemptions. Have you seen any extra front loading on that front, and have you spoken to any of your customers, maybe e-tailers, these e-commerce giants, about how they're going to approach this?
I think the cargoes is continuously shipped into those countries, just like when US canceled the de minimis, people thinking maybe there will be some decrease on the volume, but actually now what we see is that it's still on a certain level, or let's say it didn't really decrease that much because of I think the customers' behavior already changed. They are not really shopping from those retailer, and they are most of the time they already get used to buy via e-commerce those marketplace. So this is something that demand wise it didn't change. What we see is that the potential change is that there will be no longer those parcel shipments be consolidated, moving to the country like under like a general cargo. This kind of way or the method will be decreased, and most of the time, I think they will move under general cargo. But still, they request some the shorter lead time for the e-commerce. So we see the air cargo demand will be still at certain level, even they cancel those de minimis. Yeah.
What other trades have been catching your eye? On Air Cargo Unpacked, we heard in the June episode about some trades that are really flying at the moment. I mean, we've talked about this as well. Hyperscalers, anything to do with AI, particularly Taiwan market's been very strong, which I know you're very plugged into. Some of the markets out of China, some big imports into the US, as I think it was laptops and PCs, but other tech as well is up sixfold or threefold, depending on which category, into the US this year, which surprised a lot of people. What type of air cargo trends are capturing your eye?
Yeah, I think for us, we still see the very high demand, and it's still growing demand for the AI for the data center. So I think a lot of data center be built up in US, and the majority actually is export from Taiwan, and that's why the Taiwan to US the air freight market is still on very high demand, and the rates also much more higher compared with in the past, and even shortage of the capacity. That's I think the hot lane uh, we are looking to, and for sure for China to US, although we see those because of those tariff and the manufacturing move out, but there's still certain demand on high tech and the semiconductor, this kind of verticals, and the recent months, we also see some trend as certain products they coming back to China and then export into US. This is something I think because of some the urgency about the shipments, and because in China we still supply most of the freight capacity. Doesn't like for example in Southeast Asia like Thailand, Vietnam, they don't have that much direct freighter service. So during the peak season, especially start from last year, we already see some challenges on the capacity, especially now because Taiwan to US actually is very tight, and you cannot use the transit hub in Taipei to move out those shipments out of Southeast Asia. So this is some trend we have seen, and in the coming third quarter, we believe the air freight market will start to pick up.
So that's at the traditional peak of the air cargo, well, pushing into the Q4 actually. But is this demand, is this like a temporary surge, or are we thinking of this as more of a structural change in the market? Is this long-term business?
I think for the AI data center, it will be at least the next 3 to 5 years. I think that's the trend because now the AI is developing so fast, and you need a lot of this kind of data center to digest the needs, the request, and also we see that even not the data center itself, it's like those AI cabinet and also some of those collecting liner, those very small components now getting very hot. The demand is so strong out of like China, Southeast Asia, and Taiwan. So everything related with the AI actually is at a very high demand. But there's another thing that our customer just share with us is that because of the component for AI data center, actually exactly the components we will use for laptop or computers. But because of AI data center, they can pay very high price for those components. So those factory is supplied to AI data center as the first priority. So we will see the lack of components to supply for those laptops, computers in the coming months. So this is something is not related maybe with the freight market, but it will be the supply challenge for the high tech industry.
Presumably, if they're pushing people out in terms of the price or the availability of components,
Yeah, right.
I guess at certain times they're also pushing people out of the air freight market. Is
Oh,
that?
yeah, right. Yeah, that's the same. Yeah, because they are shipping on the same routes as well. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
that's true.
Okay, so people are.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're in the business of selling freight in the air cargo market, does all of is what you're saying is we're going to see a strong market through the rest of 2026 and maybe into 2027 as well?
Right, 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 right.
Okay, strong market for air cargo into 2027. Just on the routings of some of this trade changes that we've seen over the last year or so, whether you're talking about air cargo or container shipping, it seems like particularly out of China, and a lot of this probably relates to US trade policy, we've seen massive growth on routes into Latin America, into West Africa.
Mhm.
Do you see that continuing?
Yeah, I think that will continue because especially like for Mexico, in past years, I think a lot of factories, manufacturers already invested in Mexico. So once the production line already there, for sure the supply need to be follow up. So I think for this, this is some trend actually related with the U.S. China the trade tension in the past. That's the result leads to this. But for the Africa, I think it's more, it's not that much maybe related with U.S. It's just because of that, doesn't matter e-commerce or those EV, they need to find some new market to boost their
It's a
revenue.
diversion in
Yeah,
trade away from the US market where it's been a bit softer.
yeah, as well. So that's how we see they put targets to focus on those emerging markets as well. Yeah.
So Chinese companies are being very adaptable. When we see this diversion, I mean, how much of this is, okay, this is like Vietnam's winning business, Mexico's winning business, or how much of this is Chinese companies are front and center and right behind all of these changes in the supply chains? Is the control still held in China quite often?
What we see is although the trade now is out of like Vienna and Mexico, whatever, but the manufacturers, those companies, still Chinese company. So most of those, let's say, the trade decisions still made by the headquarter in China. That's also how we see this kind of market trend actually is good for those Chinese companies because in the past maybe they just stay in China and they never think about to go international. But under this kind of pressure, they have to move into other countries for the production line. So yeah, you're right. Although we see a lot of trade is moving out of China, but certain percentage, I believe it's more than 50%. Those freight still managed by Chinese company. Yeah.
So Chinese companies aren't retreating for any of these markets as things stand. But you still see this growth of China plus, plus, plus.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the trade trend. Even there's no U.S. China those tariff tensions, I think there will be still the trend to go because the labor cost in China is getting higher for sure compared to other those Southeast Asia market. So what we see is those in China maybe it will still remain those like high tech, high value those production lines, and for those labor intensive products will be moved out of China to other countries. Yeah.
And just to finish off, Kathy, have you got any advice for shippers in the air and ocean markets as we move through the rest of 26 and into 27? What would your advice be?
I think need to be agile and to always look into the market situation because nowadays the market is already not like when we just get into this industry, right? The peak season always have their traditional trend, but now all those peak season, slow season actually followed by some accident or like a black swan. Like this year, nobody knows that the Hormuz will get in that serious situation and then to impact the global supply chain. So I think now because it's always changing, so just need to close follow up the market situation and then to make the decision to decide the most suitable routes for the supply chain and for the most suitable countries to manage shipment.
Kathy Liu, thanks for joining me once more on the Freight Buyers Club.
Thank you, Mike.
And thank you all for listening. I'm Mike King. This is the Freight Buyers Club. You can find us on YouTube and on all podcast platforms. Please do subscribe, like, and follow. We'll see you all again soon.